The year is 2025. The world watches as geopolitical tectonic plates shift. Western Europe, long accustomed to dictating global norms, finds itself increasingly at odds with a changing world. Countries once dismissed as isolated or rogue actors are now major players on the world stage. The rise of the BRICS bloc and the unpredictable policies of a resurgent Donald Trump have shattered the illusion of a unipolar world dominated by the West. This new reality has exposed a glaring hypocrisy at the heart of Western Europe's foreign policy. While quick to condemn alliances formed outside its sphere of influence, Europe remains deeply reliant on its own partnerships, particularly with the United States. This double standard has not gone unnoticed by the very nations Europe seeks to isolate, fueling resentment and pushing them towards alternative power structures. The old rules of the game are being rewritten. The United States, under Trump's America First doctrine, is no longer the reliable guarantor of the liberal world order. Meanwhile, the BRICS nations, emboldened by their growing economic and political clout, are challenging the West's dominance on multiple fronts. The question is no longer whether a multipolar world is emerging, but what shape it will take and what role Europe will play in it. The answer, as we shall see, is far from certain. For decades, Western Europe has wielded significant influence on the world stage. From its economic might to its role in shaping international institutions, Europe has often set the agenda for global affairs. Yet this influence has also bred a sense of exceptionalism, a belief that Europe's values and interests are universal and should be adopted by all. This sense of moral superiority underpins Europe's approach to countries like Russia, China, Iran, and even increasingly the United States. Europe's tactic of choice has been isolation. Through sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and exclusion from key forums, Europe has sought to punish nations deemed to be acting against its interests or violating its norms. Russia's actions in Ukraine, China's human rights record, Iran's nuclear program, all have been met with varying degrees of isolation from Europe. This approach, however, is riddled with hypocrisy. Europe seems blind to the irony of condemning other nations' alliances, while clinging to its own. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, a cornerstone of European security, is a prime example. Europe relies heavily on the United States for its defense, yet criticizes countries like Russia and China for forming their own strategic partnerships. This double standard undermines Europe's credibility and exposes the flaws in its moral high ground. While Europe attempts to isolate its perceived adversaries, a different kind of alliance is taking shape. The BRICS bloc, comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has emerged as a formidable force in the global arena. Far from being isolated, these countries are actively strengthening their ties, expanding their membership, and challenging the established world order. What began as a loose grouping of emerging economies has evolved into a powerful political and economic force. The BRICS nations now represent over 40% of the global population and account for a significant portion of global GDP. With the addition of new members like Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Indonesia, the bloc's influence is only set to grow. The BRICS nations are united by a common desire for a more multipolar world, one where power is more evenly distributed and where the global south has a greater say in global governance. They are actively working to reduce their reliance on the US dollar, counter Western sanctions, and promote alternative development models. Adding to the complexity of this evolving world order is the return of Donald Trump to the White House. After a brief hiatus, Trump's America First agenda is back with a vengeance, further disrupting the transatlantic relationship and sending shockwaves across the globe. Trump's foreign policy is characterized by a disdain for multilateralism, a skepticism of traditional alliances, and a transactional approach to international relations. He has repeatedly clashed with European leaders over issues like NATO funding, trade, and the Iran nuclear deal. His warm relations with leaders like India's Narendra Modi and Russia's Vladimir Putin have further raised eyebrows in European capitals. Trump's willingness to engage with leaders often shunned by the West has fueled concerns about America's reliability as an ally and its commitment to upholding the liberal world order. One of the most intriguing developments in recent years has been the strengthening of ties between India, Russia, and the United States under their respective leaders. While this triangle is far from a formal alliance, the growing convergence of interests between these three powers has significant geopolitical implications. India, under Modi's leadership, is pursuing a more assertive foreign policy, seeking to establish itself as a leading power in its own right. Russia, facing increasing isolation from the West, is looking eastward for partnerships and markets. And the United States, under Trump, is seeking to counter China's growing influence while reducing its commitments abroad. This convergence of interests has led to closer cooperation between the three countries on a range of issues, from defense and counterterrorism to energy and trade. While the future of this triangle remains uncertain, it underscores the shifting dynamics of global power and the emergence of new alliances. A key element of the emerging multipolar world is the challenge to the US dollar's dominance as the global reserve currency. For decades, the dollar has reigned supreme, underpinning global trade and finance. However, the BRICS nations, along with other countries, are increasingly looking for alternatives to the dollar, driven by concerns about US economic policies and the weaponization of the dollar through sanctions. The use of national currencies in bilateral trade is on the rise, as are alternative payment systems that bypass the SWIFT network. The BRICS nations have also established their own development bank, the New Development Bank, as an alternative to the World Bank and the IMF. While the dollar is unlikely to be dethroned anytime soon, its dominance is gradually eroding. This shift away from the dollar has profound implications for the global financial system and could potentially reduce the leverage the United States has long enjoyed. The combined effect of these developments is the emergence of a more multipolar world. Power is becoming more diffuse, with new centers of influence challenging the West's traditional dominance. The BRICS nations, with their growing economic and demographic weight, are at the forefront of this shift. This new world order is likely to be more complex and unpredictable. Alliances will be fluid and transactional, with countries pursuing their own interests rather than adhering to rigid ideological blocs. Competition for resources, influence, and technological dominance will intensify. Navigating this new landscape will require diplomacy, pragmatism, and a willingness to adapt to changing realities. The old playbook of isolation and confrontation is no longer sufficient. In this rapidly changing world, Western Europe faces a reckoning. Its traditional approach to foreign policy, characterized by moral absolutism and a reliance on isolation, is increasingly out of touch with the realities of a multipolar world. Europe's insistence on isolating countries like Russia and China has only driven them closer together and into the arms of other powers like India and the United States. Meanwhile, its dependence on the United States for security is looking increasingly shaky as Trump's America First agenda takes hold. To remain relevant in the 21st century, Europe needs to rethink its approach. It needs to move beyond its moral high horse and engage with the world as it is, not as it wishes it to be. The world is at a crossroads. The old order is crumbling, and a new one is taking shape. The rise of the BRICS nations, the resurgence of Trump's America, and the challenge to the dollar's dominance are all signs of this profound shift in global power. The future is uncertain, but one thing is clear: the world is becoming more multipolar, and Western Europe can no longer afford to be complacent. It must adapt to this new reality, or risk being left behind. The time for reckoning is now.